Good morning. I'm Kathy Wells, President of the Coalition of Little Rock Neighborhoods, and today we welcome the candidates for filling the House District 34 seat in the unexpired term of the late John Walker. The election itself is Tuesday, January 14th. We urge everyone to watch this video live stream or to see it on YouTube through the Coalition Facebook page, which is clrn.ar. We're so glad to promote citizenship and voting and learning from the candidates directly. Each candidate here today will have the 3-minute opening statement. Then we will have questions to each in turn. Do I need to do anything to fix this? Just keep on pressing on. Okay. The same question will be asked each candidate in turn. That way we will probably avoid deep partisan strikes. We assume everyone here is supporting some worthy candidate for cause, because that's what we try and do, is promote civic action and good citizenship.
You can turn the power switch off. What about the red one?
The red one?
Okay.
I turned the whole power switch off. Is that?
That turned it all off, but that fixed it.
Okay.
You can turn it back on.
Can you get any indication that everyone can hear me properly without it? Is this now down? Okay. We will press on. Okay. So, let us take these in ballot order. Mr. Tyler first, 3 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Otis and I'm a candidate for representative. I'm happy to say that my wife, Dr. Narcissus Sylvia Tyler, is here with me today, and we've been married for almost 50 years. What are some of the things that separate me from the other candidates? Very quickly, I've listed 7 things. Number 1 was I'm married to my wife for almost 50 years. That's number 1. Number 2, I'm a retired administrator in higher education for UMS College of Pharmacy. And for my service over there, I was nationally honored for that by the National Pharmaceutical Association of America. I have 2 adult daughters, 3 grandchildren, and I'm very, very fortunate about that. I have actual experience when it comes to community redevelopment and involvement. As a former executive director of Neighborhood Housing Services, as well as an independent contractor for Neighborhood Reinvestment Corporation and Neighborhood Housing Services of America, I know firsthand the issues that deal with communities. Number 4, on healthcare. You heard me mention I'm a 30-year employee at UMS, which employed over 10,000 employees in the healthcare area. Among other things, I led students in community service where they did blood pressure screening, glucose monitoring, and community fairs, as well as growing vegetables and giving them away, fresh vegetables. Number 5, I founded the Student National Pharmaceutical Association at UMS, which won 2 national awards as the best student pharmacy organization in America. Number 6, when it came time to serve my country, which was the cause in those days, I chose the Eagle Globe and Anchor of the United States Marine Corps, where I proudly served and was honorably discharged. As a veteran, I know hand in hand the issues that veterans deal with day in and day out, and who better to serve that population than me. Number 7, proportional expectations. What can you expect of me? You can expect of me the same level of high commitment and meeting and exceeding expectations that I have exhibited over the last 30 years of my working career. And the last thing is, I absolutely will not promise you something I cannot deliver on. I will absolutely not do that. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate your vote. Otis Tyler, District 34. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Springer, please.
Good morning. I would just like to also thank the Coalition of Neighborhoods for inviting me to appear here before you today. As I've stated, my name is Joy Springer, and I'm not a native. I was not born here in Little Rock, Arkansas, but I am a transplant to Little Rock, and I consider myself a native in that I met my husband when I went to school in Arkadelphia, and we moved back here to Little Rock. So I do consider myself Stevens, Arkansas, Washita County. I left Stevens and I went to, as I said before, to school in Arkadelphia. I attended Henderson State University, where I received a bachelor's degree in general business and economics. I later, when I moved to Little Rock, I went on, continued my education. I have a bachelor's of science degree in elementary education and a master's degree in education administration. I have over 25 years of community advocacy where I promote human equity, rights for all, and also I've been on several boards. I'm a member of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. I just have a number of community activities that I've participated in. I'm a member of a service organization, sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha, Sorority Incorporated, where we promote service to all mankind. And I've lived that for so many years, for many, many years, more than I can recall. I'm also the legal assistant of John W. Walker, who served as in this position previously. I was a monitor for him as well. I think I learned a whole lot from Mr. Walker. I consider him to be my mentor, and I understand what he was about, that he wanted to promote the Constitution to ensure that all citizens, not only of this community, but within the state, were treated equally, that they will have prosperity, be able to enjoy the whatever the city had here to offer them. So on January the 14th, next Tuesday, I would appreciate your vote. Joy Springer, District 34, State Representative. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Good morning. First of all, we want to say thank you to the Neighborhoods and Coalitions for putting this event on. Honor and pleasure to be here. And also, we kind of talked a little off the sidebar about how technologically advanced they are to have this set up. So I'm excited about that as well. Next thing we want to do is I want to ask you for your vote. My name is Lee Miller. I'm running for State Representative District 34. Love your vote. Also, I want to encourage you guys to get involved in the democratic process and donate to these candidates. Donate to me first, and then donate to them. Because it takes money to run campaigns, it costs money to do things, and so we have to learn how to be active participants in the democratic process. Next thing we want to do is talk about my platform, education, those types of things. What is near and dear to my heart is affordable housing, economic development, and education. Like I said, my name is Lee Miller, born and raised here in Little Rock in the Highland Park area. Graduated from Mills. I went to College Station, Fuller, Mills, McDermott, Dillard University in New Orleans, and then I went on to Western Michigan where I got my law degree. I'm back home working, and I want to now be your state representative. As far as education and experience, I worked for Congressman Vic Snyder, worked on campaigns with Representatives Darren Williams, Fred Allen, and also has worked with the city in the housing department and AmeriCorps, the site coordinator, where we went into the neighborhoods and actually rehab homes, helped develop them, and we did a whole neighborhood revitalization. We also teamed up with St. Francis House and other community stakeholders for an event called Rock the Block. Why do I think I'm a good fit for State Representative District 34? I have the ability to not only talk to people in my own neighborhood, but reach out to the vast span of District 34. District 34 expands all the way from what I call the front part of Chenal, and it covers Pine and Cedar, south of 630. It encompasses Euler, the Fair Park area, and so there are very different mindsets and very different conversations that are happening in those communities, and we as a district have to be on the same page, on one accord, to get things done if we want to get them done. We also have to create a sense of accountability with our public servants, not our politicians. We have to get them back on page to be public servants. They're there to serve the interests of the public, and we have to hold those people accountable. As your state representative in District 34, I will allow you to hold me accountable. We will sit down, come together, put together a plan for the first 100 days so that we have tangible things that we can get done and tangible things that we can look back at as accomplishments, not just in theory, not just in philosophy, but actual things getting them done. Again, my name is Lee Miller, State Representative District 34. I want your vote. Also, you should also know that I was a field organizer for President Barack Obama in North Carolina, so I know what it means to go out and get people registered to vote. I know what it means to actually go out and organize. I worked in New York with
Time.
Oh, time. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
There we go.
Mr. Davis?
Good morning and repeated thanks to the Coalition of Little Rock Neighborhoods for this opportunity. Thank you particularly to Ms. Wells for, she called me 3 separate times to make sure that I would be here, and I appreciate that consistency. I particularly appreciate speaking with neighborhood organizations and coalitions because I know that neighborhoods are the foundation of great communities, communities are the foundations of great cities, and this great city is the foundation of our state. So I feel like we're in a privileged position today. Mr. Tyler did something twice today that I have neglected to do, which is to express my thanks and my appreciation for my wife. I know I should know better than that. I should know better than that. So I want to say very publicly thank you to my wife, Kimberly King Davis, for allowing me to do this. Thank you to my babies who I often see in the morning time and then just kiss them on the head when I get home. What a privilege it is to serve. What a privilege it is to be allowed to serve. I'm running to represent House District 34 in the Arkansas State House of Representatives. I'm running because I owe a debt of gratitude and service to District 34. I was raised in District 34, having come out of the elementary, junior, and senior high schools in this district. I'm a product of the many programs and people who pushed me forward and who propelled me into public service. One of my earliest experiences in District 34, we lived at the Advocates for Battered Women's Shelter right there at the corner of 12th and Battery. And my mother, the ostensible victim, rose from the veritable ashes of that experience to go on to become a court advocate for battered women, to work with ACORN, and to work with the Women's Project. And from that example, I understand the nobility and the privilege it is to serve. My relevant experience outside of this being a resident of this district is I'm the Director of Community Programs at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, our state's only urban and metropolitan university. I'm also an associate pastor at Bullock Temple Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, located at the corner of 16th and Park, services at 10 o'clock. And right inside of the heart of District 34, where we're privileged to live and to raise our children. I always hesitate to speak in terms of my personal agenda or platform because I've had the privilege over several years to work collectively with folks to really be thoughtful about what it is we need in our community. And I think generally speaking, I know generally speaking, that the issues are health, education, and justice. Health in an unhealthy state, education in a state that does not respect education, and justice in a state that is unjust. We have high levels of food insecurity among children and the elderly and people in general. That's a health, education, and a justice issue. We have the state getting ready to go to a contract with a private prison organization that is under investigation in the state of Texas. We're going to pay them nearly $4,000 more per year. Vote Ryan Davis, District 34.
Thank you. Now we'd like you to move your chairs in front of the table here. We're going to ask each the same question in turn, and you will have 1 minute to reply. We've been taking questions from the audience, and naturally the coalition itself has some civic issues we hope that you will support. So we're going to ask you if you support them. Are we good on the technical end, Mary?
Yes.
No. You ready? Okay, we're resuming this with the questions for the 4 candidates in turn. Our first question is, what is your position on the proposed warranty of habitability? Start with Mr. Tyler.
Could you please repeat that?
What is your position on the proposed warranty of habitability?
Okay, if I understand that, if that has to do with housing.
Correct.
Correct, okay. That's not particularly new. In 1982, the city had something like that, whereas it had a standard on the standards that housing had to meet and so forth, and code enforcement was in those days very aggressive on it. sending people to court, fighting them. But as far as safe, clean, and affordable housing, and whatever gets us to safe, clean, and affordable housing with no life and death issues in that household, I support.
Thank you. Ms. Springer?
Thank you again. I too support safe, clean, and affordable housing as well.
Okay. And Mr. Miller?
Could you repeat the question? I want to make sure I
What is
answer
your
it.
position on the proposed warranty of habitability?
My position is that we pass it. We are one of, if not one of the only states that does not currently have one. Also, you can go to jail for not paying your rent. And so again, the building block for a strong community is the family. The building block for a strong family is a place to have a safe place to have that family. So we have to go to our public servants, not to our politicians, and tell them that, hey, something has to be done about this, and hold them accountable. You cannot expect to have safe neighborhoods and communities when people are living in homes, when the roofs are falling in, leaking, things of that nature. I've been to New York City and worked and fought for tenants' rights, and so it's very important that we stand up for District 34, not just here in District 34, but all across the state, because people are living in places that are unsafe. Also, we also have to stand up and fight people, out-of-towners, who own property here, who are not held accountable as well. So we have to hold people accountable, and we have to get things done now.
Thank you. Mr. Davis?
Arkansas is in fact the only state that does not have an implied warranty of habitability, is in fact the only state that criminalizes non-payment of rent. I think that it's past time that we have an implied warranty of habitability, which means just what it says, that we give every renter a guarantee that their houses are habitable. I worked in the 2015 legislative session with the Citizens First Congress along with State Representative Ward Saban to try to pass a implied warranty of habitability. Worked also in the 2019 session where it finally got out of committee. I also am a coalition member of the Arkansas Renters United, worked with the Shorter Garden Apartments and the Big Chateau Apartments currently still, because what we have is, we have, as a municipality, a good process, but unless we have implied warranty of habitability at the state level, then all of our processes are toothless. And so it's past time that we have it, and I have experience with that. And to that end, I have refused now and will refuse further to take any money from the real estate lottery.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Ms. Springer. We'll try and have different beginning speakers. There seems to be an advantage in that position. Something else dear to the coalition heart. What is your position on the state historic tax credit?
I'm not quite sure what that entails, everything that it entails, but if the coalition supports that, I too will support it as well, because I believe that the neighborhood association, I think you all get together and you all have discussions about what's going on in the respective neighborhoods. So if you all have gotten together and decided that that is something that you would like to support, I too will support that as well.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Could you repeat the question, please?
What is your position on the state historic tax credit?
The state historic tax credit. I think that all tax credits need to be analyzed and looked at the short and long-term goals of those. I know that there are some positives that comes along with that tax credit, but I also would want to make sure, again, we're holding people accountable and doing what we need to do with those tax credits. Because a lot of times whenever you reach out to help people, you get the greedy and the needy. And so sometimes with those tax credits, people aren't all the way doing what they're supposed to do with those things. So I would then, as Ms. Springer said, we have to come back to the neighborhood associations, discuss with you guys, because we are representing you as your public service, and figure out what's better long-term and short-term. But more importantly, what's important long-term, because a lot of times politicians kick the can down the road and don't accept the responsibility and accountability that we need right now.
Thank you. Mr. Davis?
I have a 103-year-old house, so windows rose right now of trying to figure out how we can replace our windows and receive that same tax credit without violating any of the parameters of the historic tax credit. I think that a state historic tax credit is important also from an environmental impact perspective, because it encourages folks to buy existing buildings instead of felling more trees, creating more pollution, to to build more buildings. And so I think that we ought to bring the tax credit up to make it transferable and refundable at a level of 35% and not 25%.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Tyler?
Well, on a personal level, the house that I live in was the home that was Philo G. Hooper, who's considered the father of medicine in Arkansas. There's a Hooper tribe in UAMS. Yes, he was Confederate surgeon, and that's the home that I live in. If those credits fall within a strategic plan for the stability, growth of that neighborhood, I'm okay with that. I would prefer those credits go to the individuals who actually reside in those homes, not necessarily corporations. I've had the opportunity to work in different places where they have these type of credits, and there's a plus and a minus to them. But as far as that credit being within a strategic plan for a particular area of our city, I'm on board with that because those structures need to be maintained and they need to be kept in good order.
All right. Our third question, and we will start the answer with Mr. Miller, is what will you do to engage the community you're elected to serve after being elected?
Okay. Engaging the community starts with, again, my 100-day plan that I have for the district, but also coming back to the neighborhood associations, having meetings, encouraging them to create a directory for businesses and for a global calendar so that we don't have several events planned on the same day so that people can go to other events. Also, we need to streamline the information. We are now in the digital age. A lot of these things need to be online. I'm also a granny's boy, so my grandmother still likes to read the paper, so I will try to figure out how we can circulate a newsletter, not only for the district, but also in the neighborhood associations, because that is important that we take part in that. And so that's how I would engage. I would also engage with Philander Smith College, Arkansas Baptist College, and the other colleges, because we have to take advantage of the young people. I still say young people, but young people in the district, because these are people who are looking for work experience, volunteer hours, mentors, and so we have the resources, the knowledge, the skills, and ability to grow our district much further than it ever has been pushed.
Thank you. Mr. Davis next.
One of my spiritual ancestor, Ella Baker, talked about that if you want people to participate, you have to cast a wide net. And so inclusive of that is, making sure that we have information distributed on digital platforms, like Mr. Miller said, on paper platforms for folks who don't do digital platforms. And also I would propose to have a set of quarterly meetings within the quadrants of District 34. I would find a way to break up District 34 into 4 quadrants and have a quarterly meeting inside of each of those quadrants. That could take on, it could be for informational purposes, for town hall purposes, and if need be, holding Ryan Davis accountable purposes.
Thank you. Mr. Tyler next.
Realizing that the digital divide is still something that we deal with each day. If we could incorporate something that would include the consideration of those individuals who do not have computers and things like that at their homes, I would certainly avail myself to meetings, community meetings, and basically any place someone wants to meet with me and talk with me. I am retired, so therefore it means that I have the time and the commitment to do the job without any undue influence. So as communities would like to meet with me, I would avail myself to that opportunity.
Thank you. And Ms. Springer.
Well, it seems that you all have looked into this particular concern or question that you've answered, that you've asked. So I would want to know from the coalition itself what your findings are. If you have some information that you've gathered as a result of meeting with the different neighborhood associations across this district, then I would come to you and ask you what are your findings, and then we would get together and try and see what we can do in order to address the concerns that have already been presented to you.
And that completes the round of question 3. Question 4 is, what are you doing now and plan to continue doing to unite neighborhood residents in addressing addressing racial tensions. And we will start with, where do we go on? Miller next? Or is this your first time to start through?
Well, I started 3, so.
You started through Mr. Davis then. Mr. Davis starts 4. Gotta keep you straight here. What will you do to address racial tensions?
So we've had the largest rise in our Hispanic population of any state in our region, and the third largest rise in Hispanic population of any state in the nation. And I work with a group called Arkansas United, along with the Urban League, which is housed in this building, and what we're doing, Black and Brown Coalition building, particularly among young people. We're getting ready to have a high school kind of match together in this next year, and I'm embarrassed at the consternation on behalf of some folks that this is going to be, really bad, because in their minds, Black and brown people can't get along. But what I've seen out of that coalition and within working with that coalition is that we all have a common interest, which is to have good, safe neighborhoods. Our aspirations are the same, and from those aspirations, we can build communities.
All right. Next is going to be Mr. Tyler, I believe.
Would you repeat that
The
question?
question is, what will you do to unite neighborhood residents in addressing racial tensions?
For me personally, due to my personal experience, I would have a zero tolerance with derogatory racial attitudes and things like that. On a personal level, I remember in 1968, I was in the United States Marine Corps at Camp Pendleton, California, San Onofre. Black Marines were returning from Vietnam, and they felt put on, they felt that they had been disrespected, and their lives had been put in order. That was a race riot at that base in 1968. There was also race riots in North Carolina. And so I've seen firsthand what happens when ugly ideas get out of hand and grow. They have to be stopped. There has to be no tolerance for it. Fair and equitable treatment of all people. No discrimination should be the main thing about it.
Thank you. And Ms. Springer.
Okay, once again, it seems like this is an area that the coalition has already addressed, and you all possibly have some ideas about how you address the situation. So I would come to you and find out what it is, if you have a plan, what that plan is, and see how we can implement that plan in order to address this particular situation. So I don't see a need for us having to recreate a wheel. Come to the people that have already met, and then decide what it is that needs to take place. So you all are the main group, I take it, of all the neighborhoods across the city. So I think if that's the case, then we can get together and decide what needs to take place.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
Being a field organizer, President Barack Obama, working with AmeriCorps, young groups like that, having traveled, it's my experience that food and art seems to join us all. So we first have to identify the problem, and after we identify and own up to the problem, we then can go into a problem-solving plan to success, because we don't want to be problem listers, we want to be problem solvers. So after we identify that we do have racial tensions, now we need to create a calendar of cultural events that will incorporate and invite other members from the community to come to those and experience those foods, that music, those cultures, and start having community programs and things like that, because that is how you actually build a community and a neighborhood, by having a coalition of ideas and solutions and ways that we can work to one another. A lot of times we may not even know that we only have a problem because we have not talked and communicated properly. Again, back to creating a global calendar. Again, going back to being on the same page when we have current events. We need to know when there's a culture day. We need to know.
Okay. You guys answered that one, right? So we're going to question 5. What is your position on reentry programs for those returning home from prison sentences? We're going to start this time with Mr. Tyler.
My position is that if one has a judicial system that is not equal and equitable to all, you're going to have some issues. You're going to have some people who are incarcerated for some things that maybe they should not have been incarcerated for. With that said, once those individuals have served his or her time, the slate should be wiped clean. they should be given an opportunity to regain their right to vote if it was a felony conviction. And we need to move forward on that. I just don't think that they should be punished for that for the rest of their lives, that they made a mistake and got caught. I think we need to embrace as much as possible those who are nonviolent and who are emotionally stable back to our community.
Thank you. Ms. Springer?
Yes, I would agree as well. I would support a reentry program. In fact, at one of the neighborhood association meetings that I attended, one of the citizens of that particular neighborhood approached me about, doing just that. So once again, I'm not the type of person that likes to recreate the wheel. If the coalition has some ideas in place based upon their contact with the other neighborhood associations within this community, we need to get together and find out what those specific ideas are and try and implement those ideas. So I'm all for supporting neighborhoods and deciding what it is that they want to do. And I'm also a person that will listen. I don't think I said that earlier, but I will listen to what the concerns are and what you believe that the solutions to the problems are, and then decide from that as to what needs to be done in order to address any concern that there is within the neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Miller next.
Can you repeat the question, please? I'm sorry. Hear everybody out
What
there.
is your position on the reentry programs for individuals exiting prison to return home to their communities?
Absolutely, I support reentry programs. In law school, I served on a program that defended individuals who could not afford an attorney. I currently am a teacher at Shorter College, where I teach inmates at Riceville, so that when they come, I teach the class business law, so that when they come out, they can have an entrepreneurial spirit and start their own businesses. To help those programs, I will try to get a team together with the neighborhood resource centers to try to create a way we can get more grant funds. Because again, having the ideas is one thing, but you need the infrastructure and the people, and you need the money to get these programs done. We also have to identify the problem, right? We do have an imperfect system, but it's the system that we have. And so because of that, we have to come up with solutions when the system fails people. And so I definitely support those type of programs, and we need a lot of programs like that, because once you have done your time, it is now time for you to be back in the community, in the society, working, providing for your family, and we have to give people opportunities for that, because we do know that our country has massively incarcerated people.
Thank you. Mr. Davis next.
If Arkansas were a country, we would be the highest incarcerator of people per capita in the world, in a nation that is 25 times higher than any other place in the world. Arkansas has the highest recidivism rate, the highest level of people who come out of prison and who return to prison. I've seen it myself. I'm currently on hiatus through this campaign from a reentry program with which I've worked for 4 years through the University of Arkansas, Little Rock, where I've taught creative writing and letter writing to inmates. But I see folks returning time and time again, many of whom are drug addicts, and several of whom come out with no other solutions in their mind except to go back to whatever crimes that they've committed before. I would offer two things, because we can't offer things on the legislative level. We can offer on the legislative level some way to expedite the process by which a person's record is wiped clean after they serve their time. We can, on the legislative level, offer what I call certification amnesty, whereby a person can come out of prison and can receive certifications that a lot of felons cannot receive. Currently working with the young men.
Okay. You have a lot to say on that.
That's an unfair question. That's a lot. That's a big issue.
Yeah, it is. It impacts a lot of people.
Okay, we're going to start with,
Mr. Madam Chairman, you've done a good job of timekeeping to the extent that they don't get to finish their thought. Mr. Davis didn't get to finish his full explanation of certification amnesty. I'd like to hear it.
Lee, go ahead.
If a person is a felon and they come out of our system, they can't be certified in many cases to become a barber, to become a welder, to become a certified teacher. And I don't think it's fair in the particular incident that I'm thinking of, that a young man who was caught distributing 3 bags of marijuana, who studied down at UAPB in education, who got his college degree, cannot come out and be certified as a teacher, having not violated anybody violently.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, going on to.
Got it.
Yes, sir.
That was a point of clarification, since it was extended to this gentleman, that I would like to make about a question dealing with race in this country.
Lee, go ahead.
Okay.
Let's do it.
I had mentioned earlier
that when I was in the Marine Corps in 1968 at Camp Pendleton, California, San Onofre, that with returning black Marines coming back from Vietnam and white Marines, in the field, the relationships were good. Away from the field, it was chaos. And you had black Marines fighting white Marines, and a couple of Marines died in that. The point I wanted to make in recognizing the issue, as this gentleman said, a year before that, a high-level general in the United States Army said that the United States Army had eliminated the problem of racism and race in the United States Army. 2 years later, a high-level Marine Corps general said the United States Marine Corps has eliminated the problem of race and racism in the United States Marine Corps. We have to be real with ourselves, and that's the point I want to make.
Well, thank you, sir. We have it on record. All right, moving on to question 6, and we'll start this round with Ms. Springer. This is a toughie. In a state legislature predominantly Republican and extreme in conservatism, how will you be effective in getting progressive laws passed? Ms. Springer.
Yeah, so I've talked about this in previous community, for lack of a better term, debates that we participated in. I well understand that I'm only one of 100 within the House, would be only one of 100 within the House of Representatives. So you have to go in understanding the process, building relationships, and then going around to the different department heads and understanding what is taking place when it relates to a particular piece of legislation that you're trying to promote. So first of all, you're going to have to be a person that's willing to work hard, build relationships, and understand the process.
All right. Mr. Miller next.
Can you repeat the question?
In a legislature predominantly Republican and extreme in conservatism, how will you be effective in getting progressive laws passed?
The first thing is becoming a student of the position that I'm in and learning the people that I work with. Because it's very important that we first identify what the things are that they need and the things that I need. I would then show up and start doing work. Although they are Republican and conservative, we're here to serve the great state of Arkansas, and I want to believe that they're people and they're human. And so everybody should want the state to move forward. So I would first get there, become a student, communicate with them, and then also just go to work. Because people like a person that's hard working because they know you'll work just as hard for them for yourself as you will for them. And so that's the thing that's going to get things done. And also showing them how these issues affect their communities. Because a lot of times people live in a bubble and they don't realize how important the issue is until it's home. When I was working for President Barack Obama, we talked about the Affordable Health Care Act and how that act is how a lot of Arkansans actually receive health care. But if you're taught and programmed to think that it's Obamacare and it's bad for you, you could be voting against your own interests.
All right, and Mr. Davis?
Arkansas is a poor state, one of the poorest states in our union. There are some issues around which we have to build coalitions. I've seen in my work as a legislative advocate, the disparate parties come together around particular issues before, particularly around the expansion of healthcare in this state, because as Mr. Miller stated, we had the widest expansion of healthcare coverage under the Affordable Care Act of any state in the nation. I've also seen coalitions come together around some things that I think are bad legislation. I saw that our representative from Lee County, my wife's native county, come together with a coalition of other groups to give traditional public schools the same exemptions that charter schools have. I thought that was a bad piece of legislation, and it's possibly not the best example of coalition building in my mind, but putting that forward to say that it does exist and that it does happen. So I believe in the possibility.
Thank you. And Mr. Tyler?
Attitudes, prevailing attitudes, they do shift. Case in point, the greatest generation, those who fought in World War II or had spouses related to World War II, only 12% of them said that it was okay to use marijuana. Today, 67% of the people says it's okay. Common ground. There has to be common ground. There always is common ground, whether you're conservative, whether you are liberal or progressive, there always has to be common ground. And I think that we have to find and identify that common ground, find out that what we share in common as opposed to what we have at odds, and use that as the base camp to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on now to question 7, and we will begin with Mr. Miller in answers. And the question is, term limits has been an amendment proposed for voting on the November ballot. Do you favor or oppose this, and why? Mr. Miller.
Oh man, that's a tough one. I do favor term limits because we don't want tyrants, right? Also, I support term limits because we live in a capitalist society, and unfortunately, money drives our democracy here. And so, the powers that be that fund these people eventually will have to find a new person to fund in hopes that will maybe change the conversation. Also, we need term limits because some of these people are in these positions and they're not actually being held accountable, not actually getting anything done. And so I support term limits. I will say though, I support term limits. That's all I have. I support term limits.
Okay. Next would be Mr. Davis.
I have a rather limited view about term limits, pun intended, I guess, in that I know that when we had very extreme term limits years ago, it meant that we had one of the least professional legislatures in the country. And that meant that folks had to walk in there with some folder from ALEC in order to even understand, what the process of legislating was. So, although I don't believe that it serves a community to have someone ineffective in office for decades, we've seen that happen in our state before, I do believe that we have to strike a balance between having a more professional, experienced legislature and not having folks who are there for 6 years and who run off to become who use that as a stepping stone to become a lobbyist.
Okay. Mr. Tyler.
On term limits, I asked a rhetorical question. Is a person's life better now than it was 6 years ago? Has that administration benefited your life and your community? Has that administration benefited your life and community over the last 15 years? I think the term limits are absolutely essential. I don't think we need career politicians. I think we're supposed to have community government, people from the community step up and say they want to serve. They serve their term, then they go home, and then someone else comes in. I don't think that we need tyrants and kingmakers in our communities who feed at the public trough. I have serious issues with term limits and going on and on and on. I believe that we need term limits, and it's best for our community.
Thank you. Ms. Springer.
Yes, I believe I would support term limits, especially as Mr. Davis has said, when there are persons, and Mr. Miller, that have served in certain positions for years and years and years, and you're not able to see what success has taken place as a result of their service. So I would add this caveat. So depending on the time as to whether or not they've been in there X number of years, whether it's 2, 4, 6, and then the voters would be able to decide after that point in time that they have done what they set out to do with respect to any piece of legislation or anything that they decided that they wanted to support in that particular time.
Thank you. We have now completed 7 rounds of questions. We have a small bit of time left. Why don't we make closing statements of about 1 minute apiece? Does that work with you candidates?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we're going to do a close, and we're going to, I'm just going to say, I think start with Mr. Miller. 1 minute to close.
Okay. In closing, I want to ask you for your vote. Make sure you go out and vote Lee Miller, District 34, State Representative. I have the experience, knowledge, and skill, and the youth to keep up with the ever-changing demographics that's happening here in our district. I also want to encourage you to participate in this democratic process, because if we don't start now in primaries and local elections, come presidential year, we also still will not be ready. Again, vote for Lee Miller, State Representative, District 34, someone who will put boots on the ground and get things done for you in the district. Thank you for your time. Also, go to voteleemiller.com, sign up to donate and volunteer. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Davis next.
Say first and foremost that it's been an honor and a privilege to be on the doorsteps of the people of District 34, from Brody Creek to Fair Park to Broadmoor to Central High to Dunbar to the Wright Avenue neighborhood. And it's a privilege to run in this race with the people on the panel with me today. And I am grateful for this opportunity. I'm asking you to vote Ryan Davis for Arkansas House District 34. I'm asking you to go to electryandavis.com if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, if you have any suggestions. We're running together in this community on the issues of health, education, and justice in a state that is unfortunately unhealthy, unjust, and uneducated. I believe in a radical democracy where everybody has a stake. There are no top stakeholders and bottom feeders. Everybody has a stake in what goes on in this state. Elect Ryan Davis to be your next state representative in District 34.
Thank you. Mr. Tyler next.
Well, thank you for this opportunity for this, to be involved in this participatory democracy. Thank you for it. It's quintessentially an American thing. And I also want to say that as far as proportional expectations, what can you expect from me? My records have indicated that I meet and or exceed expectations. I've done that for over 30 years at UMS, and I will continue to do that for you in the legislature. I ask that you vote for me for District 34, State House of Representatives. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Springer.
Good afternoon again. Thanks to the coalition once again for allowing me to be present here. And I would also like to thank my husband, Horace Springer. I've asked him to tag along with me to several meetings, and I appreciate him being here today as well. You should elect Joy Springer as your next state representative because Joy Springer will work for you. Joy Springer will advocate for you. Joy Springer will work 12, 13, 14 hours a day in order to get the job done. Joy Springer will listen to you. The members of District 34, if you want somebody that will listen to you and hear you and understand what it is that you want from her, she will listen to you. Joy Springer will read and understand the process. Joy Springer will go in and decide whether or not what it is that we're asking for, or what it is that you want support from me for, whether it follows the Constitution. Joy Springer is that candidate that you need to elect. Thank you.
Thank you, and this completes the District 34 House Special Election Forum, sponsored by the Coalition of Little Rock Neighborhood.
Madam Chair, I have
this
a question.
day, January the 11th.
I have a question, not necessarily the candidates, but this, what if nobody gets a majority on January 13th?
There's a February 11th runoff. It's in our agenda.
Well, I'm confused. I've read it and I still don't understand. So if nobody gets a majority, we do it again on the top two on the 11th?
Well, actually, what happens if the person has to get 40% plus one in order to win the election?
On Tuesday.
On Tuesday.
All right.
That's
Then
exactly
on March 3rd, you got to run against Roderick because he's filed as an independent.
Well,
right?
no, that's not the process. So what's going to
That's
happen?
a Democratic primary.
So, yeah.
So I'm confused. Straighten me out.
So what's going to happen is if Joy Springer is elected on Tuesday with 40% plus 1% of the vote, she will serve as the remainder of the term
Correct.
of Representative John Walker, District 34. Then, as this is unexpected, this is a special election. So we're having this election because of Mr. Walker's death. Normally, the legislature decided that it would have this March election rather than May. It got moved up. So we'll have the regular March election for the seats because the expiration of Mr. Walker's term and all the other terms that will end at the end of 2020. So that is why we're having a March election coming up.
To serve in 2020 and then to 2021.
There's no Republicans filed for November?
No.
34?
No.
Okay, well, what's this about Roderick?
Robert Talley is an independent candidate. He'll be on the November ballot.
Oh, he's on the November ballot.
Yes,
I'm
he
on the
is.
March ballot.
That's,
I'm on the March ballot also.
are you?
Yeah. So whoever wins this is who I'll be facing.
Okay, all right. I think I'm straight.
It's tough because, listen, they're trying to figure it out.